Alrighty, welcome to tonight's presentation. Pearl and Andy Lockwood from Lockwood College Prep. Hello, Pearl.
Hello, Andy. Hello, everybody.
It's been a long time since we did a joint presentation, right?
Yep.
How do you feel?
Raring to go.
Okay. So let's see if you guys can see and hear us okay, because like I said, it's been a while since we were in this studio. Just making sure the tech works. Everything seemed to work okay in the beginning. And this is a presentation, interactive presentation, because we're going to be fielding your questions on the new rules of what it takes to get into a top college and the new financial aid rules, what it takes to pay for college today. Because there have been some, according to some pundits, seismic and tectonic changes to financial aid, particularly the rules. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how to navigate yourself around those rules, what the timing is, what the changes are, how to qualify for more money so that you can actually afford to send your kids to college. And we're also going to be talking a little bit about some college admissions updates. The Supreme Court had a ruling that impacted how college acceptances and college admissions works. Just to date stamp this is the beginning of October, and I am in the throes of looking at essay after essay after essay, common application after common app after common app. So I'm going to give you some, I guess, inside baseball type of feedback on what's happening, what I'm seeing in terms of essays and activities being described, and who's going to do the best and who's not going to do so well, and that type of thing. So can everyone see and hear us? Okay. If you can, just let us know in the chat. Yeah, let us know in the chat. And then we'll get going, because we hate talking to just ourselves when we do a webinar. Who is with us today? Lorraine from Mineola.
Great.
Pete from Parts Unknown. Yeah, we've got a whole lot of people registered tonight. So Angela, Leslie. All right, great. Where are you guys from? Just always interesting. All right. Great. While they're telling us, just where are people from?
So far, we're a little shy about where we live, but we
don't want your address.
Gladly saying hello.
Okay.
And hello. All right, Pete from LA.
Nice.
Stanford, Connecticut.
Coast to coast.
River, New York.
Any flyover states? Any
Syracuse.
Yeah. All right.
Wait a second. Is that my friend, Stuart?
The guy
who I met in Geneseo? I think it might be. Okay. Make yourself known if that's so.
All right, let's jump in. Let me talk a little bit about the college admissions stuff first, and then we'll get right into the money, and then we'll take your questions. This is not a formal presentation. We're not selling anything. This is just to get some information out that's going to be a lot different than the the typical college night that most high schools are having right now in the beginning of October. I'm actually speaking at a couple, so this is a little bit of a preview. Maybe some people are watching this and they will uninvite me after this. I don't know. So let's talk a little bit about college admissions first. So the Supreme Court has made it officially unlawful to admit people on the basis of race only. However, colleges still have all these diversity goals, and it looks like the way that they are trying to achieve those diversity goals is by offering applicants an ability to talk about their backgrounds, what communities they are from, and words like that in essays, which I actually think is appropriate. Supreme Court Justice Roberts seemed to open the door to allowing that, not as an end around, but as a way for applicants to describe not why they're black and should be let in, but how they might have been discriminated against and what obstacles they overcame and how that informed their experiences and how that would then, not so indirectly add to the community at large in college. So one of the issues that a lot of kids have from families that that we work with is some of these kids don't really have those types of experiences. They don't have discrimination types of dramatic stories, that they can point to and they can write about. But that's okay. You don't need to have that. That's just an opening to talk about your background, your community, and all that. So an Italian American kid can talk about having a family dinner every Sunday night and shooting the breeze and soaking up wisdom from other family members. That is just as valid as someone who had a different experience from a different race or ethnicity. So these new questions, they're not totally new, but they're more prevalent this year than last year. They are an opportunity to describe something about yourself that is interesting. When you're applying to college, this is what a lot of people don't understand. When you're writing essays, you're really trying to differentiate yourself from tens of thousands of other kids who basically look the same as you do on paper in terms of your grades and your SAT or ACT scores if you're submitting them. And I'm going to talk about that. But at the core of that mission is to be interesting, not necessarily original. That's a comment I've encountered over the summer and a lot now and every year, I guess, with essay writing, when someone will say something like, well, I want to write this, but I don't feel like it's too original. And I'll say, look, the standard is not original, because you're in most cases applying to a college with an admissions officer that might have been working there for 3 to 5 years or longer, who reviews something like 1,000 applications each year. And some applications have 5 or 6, or I was just talking to a client right before we got on here, 8 essays. You're not going to come up with something original in most cases. You might, but don't feel badly if you're not. The standard is interesting. It's not original. So when you are writing, when you are assembling an application, when you're in 9th or 10th grades, think about what you can do to make yourself more interesting, more valuable. What experiences can you have that, such as taking on leadership or initiative or going deep in some area. The term I hate is passion project. I hear that all the time. It's so annoying to me because,
it's over corporatized too.
Yeah.
And it's just a drop down filtered.
Yeah. I mean, I'm passionate about lying on the couch and watching football every Sunday. I don't think it's going to get me into college or I can't find someone to pay me for that. But you certainly can go deep in some area. And I just want to talk briefly about the components of getting into college, because I feel like this gets lost in the shuffle. So what's on the record is everything you've done from 9th grade forward. So 9th grade is really the time to be thinking about the raw material that you're going to be assembling to apply to college. By the way, it's not necessarily, this is not some like dog whistle to say this is when you should work with a college advisor. Yeah, we do have a handful of kids every year who start with us that early. Most kids don't. But I think the reason for that is they're just not ready to be coached. They're too immature, and that's that's fine. It's not a judgment. So as you encounter choices of classes, your courses, your clubs, your extracurriculars, what you do out of school, what you do over the summer, etc., what you should be thinking about is what's going to be, number one, valuable to me, and number two, what's going to look good on the college application in that order, not the reverse. A lot of people look at that in reverse order. But the main thing, I should say, or 60% of the application that gets judged when you apply to college is, number one, your GPA. Number two, your rigor, meaning how many AP or IB classes. I was talking to a client earlier today who's a senior, and unfortunately, she's not doing well in a STEM AP class, and she thinks that her best case scenario is in the 70s. This is her first marking period for senior year, and she's applying to, I think she's applying early decision to an Ivy caliber school. And she said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, you're competing with many kids who will have taken the same number or more AP classes. You're competing with kids all over the country. You're not competing only with kids in your private school or your high school." which he didn't realize. And a lot of people don't realize that. There's no quotas at a given high school. That probably sounds blasphemous or incorrect. So you decide whether that's true, whether you believe that or not. But every admissions officer I've ever had working for us or I've ever talked to has reassured me that there are no quotas at any given high school. Even though parents may think that, or guidance counselors might think that, you're competing with kids all over the world, but definitely all over the country. Anyway, so the conversation was along the lines of, well, I have my best case scenario is a 75. Should I drop, this AP STEM class? And I said, well, neither is a really good outcome, because if you drop the class, then you're going to be applying to this top college, and she's going into a STEM major also. So you're going to be applying to this top college almost like you have one hand tied behind your back. On the other hand, you can't have a 75. So given the two evils, I would remove the class and not show a 75, not give them that reason to exclude you. But they're going to have another reason to exclude you, which is that you're not showing enough rigor. So high GPA is great, but a lot of people don't understand that you also need to get into a top school.
Right.
Not everyone's gunning for a top school, but they look at whether you challenge yourself by taking the hardest classes that you can take. And the double-edged sword of attending a high school that offers many AP classes, that if you don't avail yourself of that opportunity, then you're going to be looked at negatively compared to people who don't have that opportunity at their high schools. So grades and score and rigor are the really important things. And the third thing is your test scores. But as you know, and I get this question every day too, lob in your questions, by the way, about this stuff. I am monologuing, but I don't want to make this a monologue, because Pearl has a lot to say about financial aid stuff too.
That's all right.
At most colleges, it seems like up to 50% of kids are not submitting their scores. And this varies. But not submitting your scores and getting in are two different things. And the thing is that if your GPA is slightly under par and your rigor is slightly under par, and those are the three things, and you take away your scores, you take away one of those factors, then these other two become more important. So it's much better to have high grades and high rigor and low scores versus, hypothetically, a kid who's got mediocre grades and high scores. You very rarely get into college if you have high scores offsetting low rigor and low GPA. But if you're going test optional, just understand that all you're doing is you're removing one of those academic components. Those other two, just by simple logic, become much more important. And frankly, one of the reasons why college acceptances have dropped so much is because of test optional policies and a tsunami of applications going in from kids who are not qualified to begin with, because they come up short in the GPA and the rigor also. So those three things together, grade scores and rigor, roughly 60% of the equation.
Will you just explain what rigor means?
Yeah, it means AP classes or IB, International Baccalaureate classes. It doesn't mean honors, really. I mean, in theory it does, but in practice it doesn't. And it doesn't mean college level in practice. So load up with AP and IB. There is a phenomenon of kids who have high GPAs and low test scores. Yeah. I have conversations about that all the time. A big reason for that is because of grade inflation. There's a ton of grade inflation across every high school practically. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when you admit more kids who don't take tests. So anyway, that's outside the scope of tonight. So then the other 40%, right? So 60% is academic. The other 40 non-academic percent is a combination of things that you can control, like your extracurricular activities and leadership and initiative and things like that. And then there's stuff that's out of your control, like did your parents attend that college? Where did what high school did you go to? What part of the country are you from? And then race and ethnicity and all that, subject to the recent Supreme Court ruling. So my advice on that, and this is where we spend a lot of time with our clients on, is you need to be thinking early and often about what can you do that is atypical, that is not the same as everyone else. So when I'm meeting potential clients and I'm trying to get a handle on the types of things that they do outside of school, or outside of class, I should say, in school and out of school, if the first thing they say is, well, I'm in Spanish Honor Society, I'm in National Honor Society, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you go to the ceremony, we have 4 kids, and we've been to I guess 3 ceremonies or 2 ceremonies for National Honor Society. Roughly 70%, 75% of the kids at any given high school make it into National Honor Society. So if that's all you got, that's not going to get you into a top college. What you need to be thinking about is atypical, not typical, but atypical and consistent atypical student activities. CASA, consistent atypical student activities. CASA, right? That's a writer downer to be thinking about, because you don't want to be this, what we call the born again junior, who in 11th grade, a mom wakes up and says, "Oh my God, you haven't done anything. You've been on Xbox, for 2 years. You need to run. Don't worry, I'll do it for you. You need to put together a 3-on-3 basketball tournament to wipe out breast cancer, autism, and a disease to be named later," right? So that's, an admissions officer see right through that. That's the passion project, the last minute passion project. There's someone,
well, if it smacks of being disingenuous, it'll come off as disingenuous.
Anything last minute is going to raise an eyebrow, which is why I'm on the, you might be too, I'm on the email list of a college advisor who, she's a very good marketer. She kicks my butt, I think, in how prolific she is with her emails, but she touts this passion project type thing, and she's doing it right up to the summer with seniors. I'm like, how are you going to start a project now? That's like the stupidest thing, besides the fact that I hate the term. Right. So anyway, every step of the way, you need to be thinking about, okay, well, what can I do that's going to be personally valuable to me? That's where I start with these types of discussions. Maybe it's in terms of exploring a career, or maybe it's in terms of some sort of charitable or community service type thing that's important to you or important to the family, or something like that. And then what can you do to separate yourself? And that's usually by having impact. And look, that's not just a get into college skill. That's a life skill. Like, the people who do the best in life are the ones who get involved with things. And that's why it's not a coincidence that that's what it takes to get into a top college. And the kids that we know who get into top colleges, we have 2 kids who are in what I would consider top colleges, and our clients, they tend to have resumes that almost leap off the pages. Our daughter Sammy's resume was like 5 pages. I don't know if you saw the final version last year. They just reek of involvement and impact and leadership and initiative and character. So that's really what you need to be thinking about all along, and not just following the herd and doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. All right, so let's get into the money. Again, if there's any comments or questions.
I'm gathering the questions. So if you see your question drop off all of a sudden, we're collecting them.
Okay. Are there any admissions questions, or should we get right into the?
Well, that's great. Okay, there are a couple. Are colleges viewing AP classes and early college experience classes equally in terms of rigor?
No, the AP class is the king, and IB. And the early, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the early experience, but it could mean, take a SUPA class, the Syracuse University something class. You can do that in high school, or there are other colleges that do that.
Okay, and another question, what's wrong with college level dual enrollment courses? Why are they not good for admissions?
I'm not saying they're not good. I'm just saying that in general, AP classes are treated at a higher level. But if you're actually taking classes at a local community college or something, that is actually very good. Okay.
We're good.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about, can I interview you? Will that be easier on some of the financial aid stuff?
Okay.
All right. So this year, the financial aid rules have changed. We don't know exactly when the federal form, the FAFSA, is coming out, but we know it's December.
Right. Well, right. They are legally obligated. Department of Education is legally obligated to release it or to come out with it by December 31st, 2023.
Okay. So before we get into what some of the
It ought to be
changes are,
close.
the big changes are, and there's probably 3 or 4 big changes that we should talk about.
Yeah.
Talk about the timing, like when is everything due?
Okay.
So just as a background here, I'm backing
I was going to launch into the 2 forms.
No, your background. So Pearl, we're both recovering attorneys. Pearl was a prosecutor. I was a corporate guy. That's like in the 90s. That's ancient history. Now Pearl files approximately 400 people's worth of financial aid applications a year, and that's year after year after year. So this is a good opportunity to ask her any type of financial aid questions. So there's a lot of nuances. There's different financial aid applications. There's different deadlines, all that. So let's talk about some of the nitty gritty first, and then we'll talk about some of the changes, and then we'll talk about some strategies to get more money.
Okay, sounds good.
So when do they due?
So when are they due? They are due, meaning the financial aid forms, when your school tells you that they're due. Okay, so let me break that down. The 2 main forms for financial aid are the FAFSA, which determines your federal aid, your federal eligibility for federal aid, I should say. That form, which is required at all schools, is not going to come out, as I said. Probably the earliest deadline you should see, I would think, is not going to be before January 1st, because it is likely not going to come out until the end of December. And without glitches, I don't know. I doubt it. So don't panic about this. The schools all know this. So deadlines that may have been for last year, or may seem to say December or as soon as possible or something like that, it'll be when it is actually available to the world at large. So don't panic. But the FAFSA, as unlike years in the prior, which the FAFSA normally comes out October 1st, is not going to be really available till about January. Okay. The other form, which is called the CSS profile, is required by those schools that have institutional aid to provide. So those schools, how do you know? Well, if the school's website says that they require both the FAFSA and the CSS profile, then you need to file both the CSS profile and the FAFSA for that school to adequately apply for financial aid at that school. Okay. The CSS profile, on the other hand, has not undergone a major change this year, and it is available October 1st. So for those of you applying to schools that require the CSS profile, if you are applying early action or early decision, you will have one set of deadlines for priority financial aid deadlines. It should not be confused with your admissions deadlines. Yep. Okay. Common. Yep. And if you are applying regular decision to that school that requires the CSS profile, your deadline may be later. So it is really important for your list of schools. In my own practice, I identify of an entire student's list of schools, which school has the earliest deadline, and then I file to all of the schools according to that deadline. So for now, it would just be the CSS profile that's available. Okay, so we've gone over the deadlines are according to what your school tells you.
So, and sometimes there are other applications that are required too, right?
That's right. So a school may also have, there are a handful of schools that have their own institutional form as well, like Penn, like Princeton, like Georgia Tech, like a lot of schools. Again, you need to reference and rely on the school's own website for what they require. And as the point is probably obvious at this point, there is not uniformity between the schools as to what they require. So,
all right. So before we get into the changes, what happens? Okay, so you gather up all this information, tax returns, information about your savings accounts,
right,
all sorts of other biographical stuff, W-2s, 1099s. It's a lot of crap. If you're going to do this yourself, you need to be very organized and meticulous.
Yes.
Okay. Then you file.
Yes.
Then what happens? You get money?
So then you file, and that really, as I say, feels like it's the end of the process because you finally put all this stuff together and you filed. No, that is actually, you're basically like, to use a pickleball reference, a current pickleball, you're lobbing it over. Sorry, I actually have never played, but lobbing
when is that fad going to be over?
Across the net.
I'm
The
sorry.
school gets triggered that you are interested in applying for financial aid, and they become aware. And at that point, they're going to see internally what do they require to evaluate your financial aid at that school. And some schools will make no further requests, and other schools will follow up with many other requests that are either something required at that school or something in your specific financial aid application that gives rise to additional questions. For example, if you own a business, if you're or you in part own a business, then there is likely to be at an institutional school that requires the CSS profile, they're likely to ask additional questions about that business and your asset positions, your losses, your expenses, your debts, etc. They may require a subsequent form called the business farm supplement, which basically details some of this information. It gives more color to these businesses that are owned, for example. Once you reply with every request that the school's asking for, and this happens over.
One question. Let me interrupt you.
Yes.
Who gets these emails?
Well, it is always going to be the student, but it could be the student and sometimes the parent, but not always the parent. Parent needs to.
What is your recommendation?
So my recommendation as a matter of housekeeping is schedule a once a week time with your child student that is mutually convenient. Let's just, for the purpose of this, call it Sunday at 5, where you just go right through the emails, and maybe you want to have a dedicated email for all these college financial aid and applications. All right, but if not, you just once a week, so you do not make yourself nuts every single day checking. And once a week you go through it, you see who's requiring what, you make a list, you take care of it. No, that's fine in terms of timeliness. Responding within a week is fine, just to keep track of things. Okay, and just understand, one school may be asking for several follow-up documents and another school isn't asking for nothing. You should not read into that as some kind of indication that you are or are not going to be admitted at that school. It's simply, here's the admissions process, here's the financial aid process, and eventually those two things meet, because you're not going to get a financial aid package from a place that doesn't admit you. But don't read into things like that. Just and respond in kind. If you are asked for X, Y, and Z, you provide X, Y, and Z, not X, Y, and Z, and then the whole first half of the alphabet. Okay? Yeah,
less is more.
Right.
But that point about not reading into it, I mean, it's so easy in this whole, whether it's financial aid or admissions, to, I didn't hear you, does that mean something? Or I've heard other people have heard this, like, how come we haven't? Don't, it's a long.
Stay away from the water cooler.
It's a long journey. Another word I hate. There will be ups and downs. It's
true.
But you have to discipline yourself. And this is all, I would say the last 3 minutes here have been in the category of easier said than done.
Yeah.
I will admit that. But you have to discipline yourself to not be swayed by the latest shiny object, or
which may or may not be
danger that you've heard. Yeah, exactly. May not be so.
Yep.
All right. So, all right. And then once the awards come back,
right. So eventually you will, and this don't let the back and forth of it freak you out either, or stress you out. And I'm only saying this because historically I just know what some people sort of respond to.
Some people.
Right. Some people.
Lots of people.
Get used to being asked multiple times for the same thing.
That's satisfying.
And for things that are willing to bet your life on it, that you've sent in, they've acknowledged, they have, you see it. But there are bots often at the other end of these emails. I know we entrust and feel so, wonderful about these higher institutions of learning, but, they don't always have their act together. Little secret, I'm letting you in on. So you will get, emails for things that they have, and you will just think they're right because it came from the school, so they're missing and something didn't happen right, and relax, okay? It often just things cross, or it takes a while for their sites to update.
There's humans there who are actually entering data, and they don't do it instantly.
It all ultimately, if you know you did, and it did, and whatever, if they really are missing something, eventually they will hunt you down and hound you for it. Otherwise, it will eventually catch up, and eventually, if your student's been admitted, they will prepare, and if you've applied for a financial aid package and your student gets admitted to that school, that student will receive a financial aid package, even if it were going to be comprised entirely of loans. For example, I'm just saying, it's not the case that I applied and my kid got in, but we didn't hear back, so they didn't give us anything. It doesn't work like that, okay? If you apply, you get in, you will get an award package for your student. And at that time, there's an opportunity before you commit, even after you commit, but to try to negotiate to improve the financial aid award. Yeah. And so do you want to speak to that a little, or am I getting out of the scope here?
No, this is the right timeline. But okay. Let's get back. We'll talk about negotiating, but now let's talk a little bit about first some of the changes, and then I want to talk about some of the strategies to improve aid. Okay. Why don't you post the strategy session? So I'm just going to post this right now. There is, like I said, there's nothing to buy here, but if you are interested in potentially working with us, then because you're watching this webinar, there's no charge to speak to us. If this is the first time, you get one freebie. But normally when people sit down out of the blue off the street, it's $749 to get a full-blown consultation and report that summarizes everything. This is a free 20-minute Zoom or phone call. So that's up?
Yes.
Posted? Okay. All right. So three categories of families I think we should talk about that are going to be affected by these changes are number one, people with siblings, multiple kids in college. Number two, divorced families, and number three, business owners. A little bit. So talk about the siblings. Issue, sibling discount, so to speak.
All right. So before this year, the FAFSA, or the federal methodology of determining federal eligibility for aid, which the schools use either entirely, or if they are a CSS profile requiring school, they will use both the information from the FAFSA as well as the CSS profile. Okay, so on the FAFSA, when you submit the FAFSA, in the past, it would generate what's called an EFC, which is a number that the federal government deems that your family can pay for 1 year of college. And if there is such a scenario where you submit the FAFSA and you have one student who is in college and your EFC is $60,000, then at a school that costs approximately $60,000, that student would not be demonstrating any need-based eligibility. Same set of facts. However, this one student actually has a sibling that's also in college at the same time. So now that same financial information with now two siblings in school, that EFC of 60 for one would actually be $30,000. It was split in half. So therefore, in the same set of facts, with a school that costs about $60,000, if your EFC is $30,000 because you are having the benefit of the sibling discount, you would therefore qualify for need-based. You show need-based eligibility at that school. Unfortunately, that discount for the multiple sibling in school is going away this year. For the 24-25 school application aid year, they are getting rid of the multiple sibling discount. And if you have 1, 2, or 10 school kids in school at the same time on the FAFSA, your EFC, which is going to be the same. But
wait, before you get into that, just to make things more complicated, they're retiring the term EFC. Now it's going to be Student Aid Index, or SAI.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Well, it's like so stupid. Like this is a big
but
change.
But it is for whatever it's worth.
Just we want to be accurate.
Okay. All right. So, however, those schools requiring the CSS profile,
Which are who?
Which are those schools that have institutional aid to provide, and are what that translates into, like all the Ivies and all of the schools that are more generous and are more expensive and have more money and
it's like
aid to give.
About 400 colleges.
And it is about 400 of the 4,000 or so schools that are out there. Yes.
So those
now
schools,
those schools are they are silent as to that change or making such a change. They are still asking for all of the information about other siblings, where they go to school, what the cost is for those schools, etc., as they have in years past. So I am not sure until we embark on this year what the treatment of the multiple siblings in schools at those schools is going to be. But as far as your FAFSA only schools, that will unfortunately will very meaningfully change the SAI, or your financial eligibility.
Yeah. So
under the federal rules.
So here at Lockwood College Prep, we're not necessarily panicking yet. By the way, we have 3 kids in college this year. So we're not panicking yet, because our belief, just from industry chatter, is that although this is a rule change going into effect, if you're already in the throes of college and you've relied on that discount, that sibling discount, previously, it's our hope, reasonable hope, that colleges are not going to pull the rug out from under those families that have already been relying on that. I've also read from various sources that many colleges are going to allow the that actual argument as a basis to appeal an award, which is that every year we've been getting this financial aid work, so we have 2 kids in college at least, and now all of a sudden we can't, we're not getting that. Can you please help us? They may do a one-time, all right, we're going to consider it, just for this year, just to help you out a little bit. So it's not written in stone. There's a lot of guessing. We'll know in a few months.
We'll know in a few months is right.
Yeah. Can we move on to divorce families?
We sure can. Okay. So the overall, how this works generally in terms of the financial aid forms. A custodial parent needs to be selected as between the separated or divorced parents. So on the FAFSA, only one parent, only the custodial parent, and only that parent's financial asset and income information will be reported on the FAFSA. Okay, so what's changed is determining what makes a custodial parent. Which parent goes on that form. I'll get back to that in a minute. The CSS profile, on the other hand, required by about 400 schools, will ask a few pieces of information about the non-custodial parent. Just some name, occupation, is there an agreement regarding child support or college, a couple of questions with no other financial information of the non-custodial parent being required or being asked for. None of it, not the asset, not the income, nothing. However, a subset of the 400 schools requiring that require the CSS profile, a subset of those 400 will also require a non-custodial parent profile to be filed, which is a mirror image of the CSS profile, and it asks for all the asset and income information of that non-custodial parent. And then ultimately, that school requiring both pieces will allot a different percentage to each, the custodial and the non-custodial parent, in terms of what the award is. However, now I will get back to my original point.
Yes.
What makes the custodial parent and what's different? Before this year, the custodial parent was deemed the parent with whom the student resided with in the most recent 12 months. Okay, so clearly there was some massageability, et cetera, and so forth. All right, that is gone. Goodbye.
Well, so I'm at the risk of sounding sexist and whatever, cisgender. This deal with it. You married it. In many cases, the mom, the ex, the divorced mom, was the one that the kid lived with, and the mom had the low income, and that mom would do okay with financial aid because her income was lower, whereas the ex-spouse dad, maybe he was the one who was the breadwinner. He was not considered to be the custodial parent. Okay, so now what?
Now here are the rules, and I am just going to read because it's quite nuanced. Really? And it's really, and it's important. Really? Yes. Number 1, the parent who pays child support is the parent of record, the custodial parent, if that child support amounts to more than half of the student's support. Number 2, parental income and assets for a student whose parents are divorced or separated but not remarried is determined by including only the income and assets of the parent who provides the greater portion of the student's financial support. Basically the same thing. And it doesn't matter if a parent pays child support if that support does not amount to at least half of that child's support.
All right. So correct me if I'm wrong. In most cases, the parent that provides the support is going to be declaring that child as a dependent on his tax return, again, cisgender, etc. And that is going to be the person filing, which is going to hurt many people who normally, under the previous rules, the single moms who would have gotten financially.
Right.
Is that basically accurate?
Basically accurate. My comment again would be the argument really is how much is that child support being given, and then you as the, let's say, residential parent, if you are, you're paying your mortgage, you're paying your food, your expenses, all your bills, all of that comes in as support. Okay. So if that's more than... So
that's a term of art, support?
Well, that is what this seems to say, because originally there was, discussion that whichever parent claimed the student on the tax return was deemed the custodial parent for financial aid purposes. However, that was just a bit simplistic. 2, still will throw into haywire all families that have had their divorce and separation agreements that predate now, which are a lot of families. Yeah. But so this is just, it's a bit more fair because they're trying to keep the responsibility with the one who's financially most responsible. Yeah. And so they're not saying it's de facto that parent who gives child support according to a family court judge, but rather the overall support of that child, which includes consideration of what that child support is.
Okay. I think in most cases, what they're when you take the 30,000-foot view, what they're trying to do is align the IRS rules with the federal financial aid rules, two separate bodies. Title IV, Department of Education versus Department of Treasury, IRS rules. So this is an attempt just to make things simple, but I think it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater in many cases.
And again, like we were saying before, the chatter is the buzz in the industry is that schools will try to honor the way families would have logically relied on it for those families that are already in school.
Okay, hope so. All right, so let me cover the business stuff, the business owners real quick. So under the old rules, anyone who owned a business that employed fewer than 100 employees could put down the value of their business on the FAFSA as being 0. There's a question to value your business if you are self-employed. Most people didn't know that, right? Even the accountants we have as clients didn't know that. So this is not such a big deal in terms of how many are going to be impacted. But for us, it's kind of crappy because that was one of our pet go-to strategies. The way I would suggest you approach this now, if you are self-employed and you own a business and you're supposed to answer a question about the value of your business, is to be pretty pessimistic. Like there's a difference between selling your business on the open market at arm's length versus I've got to sell it in 7 days because the FBI is closing in and I've got to sell off all my meth lab equipment or whatever you do for a living. So that's one way just to kind of think about this value of a business is in the eye of the beholder. So you want to be pessimistic on paper. But there are other loopholes, right, that we should be talking about. So for business owners in particular, there are a series of provisions in the tax code, which our accountant, the legend, self calls himself the legend, Rick, refers to as tax scholarships, which are basically ways to unlock cash from your business by availing yourself of certain tax strategies, which are different for everyone, but it could be forming a sister company that's a C corp that stores earnings and channeling money there in a legitimate way. Management contracts, putting your kids on payroll, could be leasing, gifting and leasing back. There's probably 7 or 8 total types of strategies that we look at with our clients to help them obtain tax scholarships, our self-employed clients. But in terms of loopholes for everyone, really, what you need to understand about the financial aid rules, and these are not changing, is that the main factor is your income. There's no magic ceiling. Like if you go over it, it's you're not going to qualify for anything. But there are certain rules of thumb which I can give you. If you're applying to a private college, the closer you get to that $200,000 adjusted gross income number, the harder it is to qualify for anything, unless you have more than one kid in college at the same time. That's at a private school that's hopefully not going to be affected by the financial aid rules, the federal rules. So private versus federal. And then if you're trying to get money from a state university, either in your or out of your state, either to get federal funds, you need to be very low income-wise, maybe $50,000 or $60,000. A lot of states, like the state of New York, have programs where you can make up to $125,000 and you'll qualify for the Excelsior program. And many other states have similar types of merit opportunities like that. Then what you need to be looking at is where have you saved your money? And some assets count against you more than others. Some don't count against you at all. The stuff that counts against you more than others, that penalizes you more, is money in your kids' names. So that generally means custodial accounts like UTMA and UGMA. It doesn't mean 529s. 529s are supposed to be considered parent assets. One of the rule changes, by the way, is about a particular setup of a 529 where if a grandparent or someone else, not the parent, owned the 529, under the old rules, if that money was used to pay for college, there'd be a penalty the following year. Under the new rules, this is actually one good change. Yeah. Under the new rules, there's no penalty for someone else paying. So that's a good thing. But the thing about the 529 in general is if most 529s are owned by parents, those penalize you. It's not how much. It's not whether they penalize you, it's how much. So for the most part, most colleges will penalize you at a lower amount, 5% of that total balance in your 529. Some of the private schools will still penalize you like it's a child asset, which is about 25% of that amount. So if you have $100,000 saved in your child's name, you're going to lose eligibility of about $25,000. If it's saved in your name, like a mutual fund or something, you're penalized at 5%. And if you put it in something that's exempt, 0. You don't have any penalty on that. So the things that are exempt are, number one, retirement accounts, any 401k or 403b, etc., any balance in your pension. Those are all exempt, and people make mistakes by putting these on, disclosing these in the financial aid applications.
Yeah.
This year's application is going to be streamlined, supposedly from 108 questions down to 36, but there's going to be a bunch of sub-questions. So it's still going to be easy to make these mistakes, as far as I'm concerned. You'll see when they come out. So retirement accounts are exempt. They
from the FAFSA.
Well, they're okay. So
they're exempt from calculation, right?
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm just talking about the FAFSA right now.
Sorry.
I accept your apology. Doesn't happen much, but when it does, I accept it. Okay. Insurance products are exempt. Life insurance with cash value. Annuities are exempt. If you have an annuity that doesn't get disclosed on the, you shouldn't do this by accident. They specifically say don't tell us anything about insurance or annuities. And the fourth exemption on the FAFSA is the value of your primary residence. So those are the 4 things that are exempt, loopholes, legal loopholes on the financial aid applications. retirement accounts, life insurance, annuities, and your primary residence. And as Pearl was saying, the CSS profile, which is not shrinking in question, it's about 200. It could be even 300, depending on what colleges you're applying to. Much more invasive. They ask you many more questions. We don't need to get in the weeds, but they are. If you're applying to a college that takes both, one big mistake that you need to avoid is having inconsistent answers across those two. And this year, when people are filing their CSS profiles in October, but their FAFSA maybe in January, it's going to be a lot easier to make that mistake, to not have the consistencies. So true. All right. What else do we have to go here tonight? Negotiations, or do you have any other financial aid wisdom?
No, I think.
Okay.
I think I'm
all right. So I'll talk a little bit about how to negotiate, how to appeal, because that's a big deal.
Sure.
After you get your award, that doesn't mean that it's set in stone. It's not a final award. It's an offer. So what can you do to improve it? Well, number one, if you have other offers, you can play them off against each other. I always try to do this. The best defense is a good offense. When we work with families, we try to have a strategic college list before they finalize it that consists of colleges that rival each other. So this process is not just about kids chasing, colleges around. Colleges will also compete with each other. And that's a nuance that I think a lot of people don't really understand. But this is a business. These colleges have to fill seats, and they don't always hit their goals. And when I work with kids, I tell them all the time, look, don't think of yourself as, Joey applying to college. Think of yourself as you are a marketer of Joey. Yeah. You're in the business of marketing this product, who happens to be a kid named Joey, to get into a top school and to get money. So the best defense is good offense. Have colleges that compete with each other so you can play them off against each other. And they could be rivals in the same conference, or they could be colleges that are reputable in the same types of programs, but not necessarily in the same conference. You have to do a little bit of thinking and digging around, but colleges that compete is big. It's great to have other offers. If you made a mistake on your forms, you can usually bring that to their attention. If you over included, you made a mistake and you included your retirement accounts, and then you saw this webinar or something, and you're like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. That's an appealable thing. We talked before about an appeal about the new rules applying multiple kids in college. The classic appeals are if you have a different story that they don't know about from the numbers. So for kids who are graduating 2024, the financial aid year for their income taxes is 22. But if you had a lousy 23, like we're in the 10th month of 2023 as we record this, they won't know about that. So you've had a change in income. So that is definitely an appealable thing, a potential argument. And if you had some sort of unusual, extreme, dramatic expense, I live in an area where we pay a lot of property taxes. They know that from your zip code. That's not new information. You want to give them new info. So that could be, unfortunately, huge medical expenses that weren't reimbursed. I was just saying this to friends of ours yesterday. I think we've had 3 clients pass away in our practice in the last 4 or 5 months. And it's awful. But those are the types of things that those are appealable on a number of fronts. It could be the expenses, the unusual expenses. It could be loss of income. There's a lot of different circumstances that they may not know about from the financial aid applications, because those tend to be retroactive or retrospective, I should say, because they're 2 years back. So keep in mind, you always have to have new information. It's got to be significant information. It can't be something.
It has to be now. It can't be something that is going to maybe happen in the
I might
future.
get laid off.
Right.
And it can't be something that's going to cause an eye roll, like, this is one of your favorites. We have a lot of expenses. I send my kids to summer camp every year. Admissions officers, financial aid officers, they're usually like, middle management guys. They make $85,000 a year. They don't live in affluent areas where they send kids to summer camp. They're not going to be sensitive to that type of thing.
And what I'm about to say is true of whatever your special circumstances will be, whatever an essay is going to be. No matter what it is, the application, all of this is always going to be viewed in the context of everybody else's story, application, etc. So you need to have that judgment that it's not just you in a vacuum. It's your COVID story where you were, had chills for a week and missed work is not going to hold up.
Sniffles.
And it may really count against you if someone else has a tragedy.
God damn it, Pearl! I had
real
sniffles,
tragedy.
not chills, and
A
I
real
was
So
sick. I was
you
sick.
have to exercise that judgment too, all along.
What Pearl's saying is, don't be a narcissist. Don't be a hypochondriac.
This goes beyond the college process.
Yeah,
please.
Everything
Let's
we're
all
saying.
Pitch in.
You are getting insight into our pet peeves that we talk about every morning at like 5:45. So yeah, think about the whole context, and the context is beyond just yourself.
Right.
Fair?
Yes.
All right. So I think we've, this has been like a tour de force, about a solid hour of trying to give you an overview.
And we'll be back.
An overview of what it takes to get into a top college today and what it takes to pay for college. Obviously, you know that this is our business. If you think what we said today makes sense to you and you're interested in having a conversation, as long as this is the first time we've ever spoken, it is free. As long as we have the room for you. I don't know exactly how many people are, how many spots we have on the calendar because it's a crazy time of year. I don't think it's that many, but I didn't check before. Happy to chat. Are there any questions that we didn't get to?
Yes.
Should we answer them?
Let's do it. Yeah, let me just see if one.
Or should you answer them?
Snuck in here. We'll tag team. How's that? All right, here we go. I'll do some of the asking.
Should we do Final Jeopardy music?
Do you have it queued up?
No.
All right.
I don't like Jeopardy that much.
I know you don't.
Even though I beat you every night.
Okay. If an SAT score falls in the middle of what is accepted by certain college, should you submit, or only if it exceeds the average?
Yeah. Okay.
Good question.
I talk about that probably 5 times a day, some days. Here's my rule. So colleges publish their range, 25% to the 75th%. My rule is if you're in that range, 25 to 75, I would submit. If you don't submit, the implication is what? Not that your scores were too high and you didn't want to brag, right? It's that you didn't hit those scores. So that is my rule. That's not something that guidance counselors necessarily agree with. I was talking to a client last night, actually. We're working with her sister now, Melinda, and her son, who's in his freshman year at his early decision school last year, when he was told by his school guidance counselor at his elite private school, do not submit your scores and don't apply early decision. She ran that by me. I said, wait a minute. I thought I didn't remember correctly. He had like a 31 or 32 in his ACT. It was just above the 25th percentile. So it might have been a 30 was their bottom. He had like a 31 or 32. And the rest of his application was really strong, not just grades, but also his extracurriculars, phenomenal extracurricular activities, really great kid. And so she ended up not taking the guidance counselor's advice. She decided with me. He got in and he got their top scholarship also for like $30,000 a year. So like I understand the guidance counselors in general. I think they mean well, but a lot of times I think they're just afraid. The fear is you don't want to give an admissions officer something to reject the candidate, which I agree with. But not submitting a score that's in the range, I think, is silly, because the only reason you don't submit is because you didn't hit that range.
Right. The inference will be lower than your actual score. So, okay. Do state schools typically match competing merit scholarships? How would you appeal a merit scholarship if the university only offers one appeal date starting in June?
State schools generally don't have that much budget, so it's harder to appeal. But you follow the rules. There's no magic there, and it does help to have other offers. But we do a lot better negotiating with private colleges.
Is the CSS profile required for merit-based aid or just need-based aid? It depends on the school. If the school requires it and tells you what it's for, then you would determine. But more often than not, if the school requires it, you got to fill it out.
I was talking to a client from a couple of years ago who's now got younger kids, Denise, and she said, "Yeah, my daughter's applying to a bunch of schools, so I need Pearl to do the forms." So I asked her what schools, and it was kind of like, okay, that one, because she doesn't qualify for need-based aid. I was like, okay, Fordham, yeah, you need it for that one. This one, you don't. So You have to check with each college whether
Right.
they require that. Our rule is, look, if one college requires financial aid applications for merit, you might as well apply everywhere.
Exactly, because who does one year and who does or doesn't the next year can change. And if you want to be in full consideration for all the schools that require the CSS profile for merit consideration, submit it.
All right, and here's a story we haven't talked about recently, but we talk about this. For a while, we were talking about this kind of frequently, which is that if you're self-employed or something along these lines, we had a client who was self-employed, and it was right during the beginning of COVID, pandemic, and his business, which I think something like 80% of the revenue were based on one client, his business tanked because that one client shut down or stopped paying them. And then he's like, oh, wait a minute, I need some money to be able to afford to send my child to I think it was Northeastern. And the problem was, by the time we spoke, he was about 6 days too late past their deadline in June to even get loans.
Right.
So had he filed a FAFSA just
to preserve the opportunity.
Yeah, just for, I was going to say, something and giggles. Then he would have he would have had that preservation.
Right.
So that's important to think about also.
Yes. Okay. In the past, FAFSA and CSS were available at the same time. It was more consistent in terms of the numbers on the page between the two forms. Now that the CSS will have to be submitted before the FAFSA and the assets could change between the time the forms are sent in, will this create more questions back to families from the financial aid departments? It depends how varied they are. If they're just obvious, oh, my cash checking and savings was $5,004 on when I submitted the CSS profile, and now it's $2,000 because I've gone through Christmas and I've bought presents, and now my balance because it's now January and I'm submitting the FAFSA is $2,000. They're not going to ask about that. But
well, let me just to amplify that. So what I was saying before, in terms of the formulas, assets are only penalized around 5%, and that's why, because they fluctuate. Income is the most heavily considered factor in that. So a minor discrepancy, don't worry about it.
And to that end, which we didn't get into either. So for this upcoming financial aid season, 24-25, the operative tax return that is to be used from when answering all information on both the FAFSA and the CSS profile is the 2022 tax return. And sometimes if your current situation is, let's say you've been let go from that job, or you have a different job, or you're divorced or separated since that married and joint filing circumstances are different, and you are tempted to, let me just use different information, or I'll just use another year, or I'll just, adjust those. No. You have to live and die by the 2022 tax information for these forms for submitting it. And then once you have the opportunity and a financial aid award is issued, you can then say, this is how my circumstances have changed. This is no longer the case, and that's no longer the case. And that's how you have to handle that.
I mean, this year, there's even less of an opportunity to even have any type of discretion. You never did, but this year, the IRS data just goes right into the FAFSA.
Right.
That's another change. It's supposedly, we'll see, but supposedly
streamlined.
Yeah, there's behind the scenes. By the way, this is sort of like front of the house stuff, but in the back of the house, colleges are freaked out about this because they don't have the manpower to implement all these changes. They're going to get it right, or they can't hire more people, even though they charge a lot. They operate on very thin margins. They're not going to be able to get this done. It's going to be really sloppy. There's going to be a lot of mistakes. You're going to have to be patient.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to verify everything. You're going to really need to take a fine-tooth comb and go through all of the numbers, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense this year. That's my prediction.
It will come to an end, though. I promise. It does. Every year it does. Feels never-ending, and it does come to an end. Okay. I missed the beginning of this session. Will you send a recording of this? Yes. Okay. Is this information relevant to a Canadian applicant to a U.S. school?
Well, the profile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. What about the 529? Is it for the family or just the student in college for a parent asset?
It's a parent asset for the family.
Right.
because you can
right.
switch the beneficiaries, or the kids. So it's all. So if you have a 529 for 3 kids, 3 different 529s, they're all on the FAFSA.
Does a child getting emancipated at 18 from a parent affect the parental support? If emancipated literally means by legal definition, if they are legally emancipated.
You see how far over you've slid.
Oops, sorry. if a student is legally emancipated, that's fine, but it can't be like little e. I am emancipated because I want to be emancipated. It has to be a legally documented emancipation.
You were listing. In my breath.
Do retirement accounts include IRAs and Roth IRAs? Yes. With 2 kids in college, do we have to do 2 FAFSAs? Yes. Each student needs their own FAFSA submitted if applying for aid.
Well, you don't have to do
You
anything.
don't have to,
right.
But if you want to be considered for aid for both
right.
of those college-bound children, yes.
Oh, by the way, I was actually making a joke just to be my annoying, obnoxious self.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people think that they have to file a FAFSA every year, no matter what. You don't. I mean, really, especially if you get in the first year and you get merit aid, you don't get need-based aid, and the college says we don't need you.
Do this again.
Yeah. So you actually there's no rule that you have to file a FAFSA at all.
But you may need to at the school that awards you merit aid. You need to find out at your specific school because it could be a prerequisite to continued merit aid. Okay. When determining the custodial parent after a divorce, do we consider support provided in 2022? Yes, you do.
That's the tax year.
Yes, that is the operative tax year. And yes, it will. And then it says current support. Could it change year to year if the level of support changes? Yes, it can. And you will be asked on the CSS profile about your 2023 expected income, and it will specifically ask, are there any changes expected to your financial information? And there's an opportunity on the CSS profile to provide a written explanation as well. So that's how you would handle that. And then, of course, again, you would have the opportunity to explain anything away during, an appeal. Okay.
Okay. Right, we're done?
Yeah.
All right, good. That wasn't bad. A little over an hour. Okay, guys, so thanks for joining us. Thanks for being part of our little community and spreading our name around like a virus, a nice, benign, cheerful virus, ray of sunshine in Pearl's case. And, if you have any questions at all, you know how to reach us.
Yes.
And we will be back with, we want to do a whole workshop on the student loan repayment plans for people who have those loans. So
those are now due.
So yeah, now I'm pressuring you to get ready because she is the expert in that, and I'm going to grill you like a piece of fish on how that works. And we're going to give valuable information. Okay. Have a great night. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for listening. Bye.